March 22nd, 1945. The moon hangs low over the Rhine River near the German town of Oppenheim. The water is black, cold, and moving fast, the final natural fortress protecting the heart of the Third Reich. On the eastern bank, exhausted German sentries peer into the darkness, listening for the inevitable roar of airplane engines or the shriek of artillery that signals an invasion. To the north, that storm is indeed gathering. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery has amassed over 1 million men, thousands of tanks, and a literal naval armada for a colossal set-piece operation to breach the river. The world is watching him. But here, in the south, there is no artillery barrage, no smoke screens, just the sound of muffled oars and the heavy breathing of men from the U.S. 5th Infantry Division. General George S. Patton is not waiting for the authorized script to be written. He is rewriting it in real time. He intends to cross the greatest barrier in Western Europe without a preliminary bombardment, solely to steal the thunder from his British rival. As the first canvas boat slides silently into the current, the Allied command is about to be shaken, not by failure, but by a ruthless race for glory. March 1st, 1945. The Western Front stretches like a jagged scar across Europe, from the North Sea down to the Swiss border. The Battle of the Bulge is over, a bloody memory buried under the thawing snow of the Ardennes, but the war is far from finished. The Third Reich, though battered and bleeding, has withdrawn behind its final moat, the Rhine River. For centuries, this waterway has served as the mythical shield of Germania, a psychological and physical barrier that no invading army has successfully crossed since Napoleon. At the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force in Reims, General Dwight D. Eisenhower stares at the operational maps. The mood is not one of triumphant celebration, but of grinding, industrial friction. The Allied armies are a massive coil spring, pressing against the German border. But the political mechanics holding this coalition together are beginning to fracture. Eisenhower is committed to the broad front strategy, a methodical, uniform advance along the entire line to destroy the Wehrmacht west of the Rhine before crossing in force. It is a strategy designed to minimize risk, ensuring that no single Allied army is exposed to a flank attack. But to his subordinates, specifically the British, it feels agonizingly slow. Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery, commanding the British 21st Army Group in the north, argues that the war could be ended in weeks if Eisenhower would simply unleash a single, full-blooded thrust toward Berlin. Montgomery believes that the northern route across the North German plain and into the industrial heartland of the Ruhr is the only decisive path. He is persuasive, demanding, and arguably the most experienced commander in the theater. He insists that to cross the Rhine he needs absolute priority in logistics, fuel, ammunition, bridging equipment, and American divisions placed under his command. Eisenhower, balancing the fragile ego of the British Empire against the surging industrial might of the United States, grants Montgomery his wish. The main effort will be in the north. The upcoming Operation Plunder is designated as the primary Allied strike. The result is a logistical tidal wave flowing toward the British sector. Trains, trucks, and gliders are diverted to support Montgomery's 21st Army Group. He begins planning the crossing with the meticulous, almost scientific precision that characterizes his career. He does not intend to merely cross a river. He intends to stage a spectacle that rivals the Normandy landings. He requests a massive airborne drop, a naval liaison force to bring landing craft overland, and a preparatory artillery barrage that will turn the eastern bank into a moonscape. He will not move until every screw is tightened, every tank is fueled, and the risk is mathematically reduced to zero. To the south, this decision lands like a hammer blow on the American 12th Army Group. General Omar Bradley, quiet and professional, seethes privately at the diversion of his resources to the British. But it is his subordinate, Lieutenant General George S. Patton, commanding the U.S. Third Army, who takes it as a personal insult. Patton is currently tearing through the Eifel region and the Saar-Palatinate Triangle. His armor is moving so fast that his intelligence officers struggle to keep the maps updated. He is capturing German towns before the localized commanders even know the Americans have broken through. Yet, the orders from headquarters are clear. Patton is to conduct an aggressive defense. He is to clear the west bank of the Rhine, but is generally expected to halt there, protecting Montgomery's southern flank while the British Field Marshal prepares his masterpiece in the north. To a man like Patton, who views warfare as a test of will and speed, being told to wait while Montgomery tidies up his battlefield is physically painful. He sees the Wehrmacht dissolving in front of him. He sees roads left unguarded and bridges blown only moments before his tanks arrive. He knows that the German army in the south is disarrayed, confused, and ripe for a knockout blow. Patton senses that the war's finale is being scripted without him. The glory, the headlines, and the history books are being reserved for the Northern Crossing. But George Patton has never been a man to follow a script that leaves him in the audience. As his tanks crush the wet cobblestones of the Rhineland, closing in on the river, he begins to formulate a plan that is technically within his orders, but spiritually an act of insubordination. He will not stop at the water's edge. He will not wait for the aerial bombardment. He will turn the strategic necessity of the broad front into a competitive sprint. On March 7, 1945, the dynamic of the entire Western Front shifts violently due to a stroke of blind luck 50 miles north of Patton's sector. Soldiers of the U.S. 9th Armored Division, advancing toward the town of Remagen, find the Ludendorff Bridge impossibly intact. Despite German demolition charges detonating, the massive steel structure shudders but holds. In a frenzy of initiative, American GIs sprint across the damaged span under heavy fire, securing the first Allied foothold east of the Rhine. The news electrifies the Allied command. Eisenhower is jubilant. The psychological barrier of the Rhine is broken. But for Field Marshal Montgomery, this is an inconvenient disruption. The Remagen bridgehead is geographically isolated, located in difficult, rugged terrain that leads into the Westerwald Hills, hardly the ideal highway for a mass armored breakout. Montgomery argues that while Remagen is a useful distraction to draw German reserves, it is a strategic dead end. The real crossing, the decisive blow that will shatter the German defense, must still be his Operation Plunder in the north. He doubles down on his preparations, amassing a stockpile of artillery shells that rivals the output of a small nation. Meanwhile, Patton watches the Remagen development with a mixture of envy and opportunity. He realizes that the Rhine is not the impregnable wall headquarters fears. If a handful of infantrymen could seize a bridge at Remagen, his entire Third Army could certainly force a crossing further south. But time is running out. Montgomery has set the date for Operation Plunder, March 24, 1945. The entire Allied logistical machine is gearing up for that date. Journalists from London, New York, and Washington are flocking to Montgomery's headquarters, briefed on the upcoming greatest amphibious assault since D-Day. Patton calls his corps commanders to a secret meeting. The atmosphere is conspiratorial. He orders General Manton Eddy of the 14th Corps to make the Rhine look like it's just a damn creek. He instructs his engineers to scour the rear areas for assault boats and bridging equipment, effectively hoarding supplies that should, by rights, be heading north. He moves with a calculated duality. On paper, he is clearing the Palatinate as ordered. In reality, he is positioning the 5th Infantry Division and the 4th Armored Division for a coiled spring leap across the river. The terrain in Patton's sector, near Mainz and Oppenheim, offers a deceptive tranquility. The river here is wide, nearly 800 feet, but the current is manageable, and the eastern bank leads into flatter terrain suitable for tanks. However, the true enemy is not just the water or the Wehrmacht. It is the Allied timetable. If Patton asks for permission to cross, headquarters will likely deny him to prevent diverting focus from Montgomery. He needs to present Eisenhower with a fait accompli. He needs to be on the other side before anyone can tell him to stop. Across the river, the German situation is catastrophic. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, recently transferred from the Italian front to command OB West, arrives to find a ghost army. The units defending the Rhine are shattered remnants. Volkssturm militia composed of old men and boys, convalescent battalions, and fragments of panzer divisions that have no fuel. They have no air support. The Luftwaffe has effectively ceased to exist in the West. Their communications are severed by relentless Allied air interdiction. They are fighting blind, yet they are still dangerous. The German doctrine of fanaticism holds the line. Machine gun nests are expertly camouflaged in the riverbanks. 80 S-Mina flak guns, depressed to fire horizontally, watch the crossing points. Kesselring knows the Allies are coming, but he too falls for the deception. He looks north toward the massive smoke screens and artillery registration fires of the British First Army Group. He commits his meager reserves to face Montgomery, believing that no general would attempt a crossing without the kind of overwhelming preparatory bombardment that signals a major offensive. He does not understand George Patton. He does not understand that for the American general, speed is the ultimate weapon, and silence is more lethal than artillery. As the Ides of March pass, the stage is set for a study in contrasts. In the north, a sledgehammer is being slowly, methodically, raised high above the head of the German army. In the south, a stiletto is being quietly drawn from its sheath. The race to the Rhine has become a race against time, command politics, and the inevitable end of the war itself. Inside the tactical caravan of Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, the war is not a chaotic brawl. It is an equation to be balanced. The air smells of tea and pipe tobacco. Staff officers move with hushed reverence, placing acetate overlays on pristine maps. Montgomery does not gamble. He organizes. For Operation Plunder, he has assembled a force that would be sufficient to invade an entire continent, let alone cross a river. The statistics are staggering. 1.25 million men, 30,000 tons of ammunition delivered daily, and a naval component of Royal Navy landing craft hauled overland by flatbed trucks. Montgomery's philosophy is rooted in the trauma of the First World War. He refuses to send men into battle without overwhelming material superiority. He refers to this phase as tidying up the battlefield. To him, the Rhine crossing must be a demonstration of British professional excellence, a flawless orchestral performance where the infantry, armor, artillery, and air power enter at precise cues. He has ordered a massive smoke screen, 50 miles long, to blind the German observers for days prior to the attack. He has scheduled a daylight airborne drop of 2 entire divisions, the US 17th and British 6th, to seize the high ground after the river is crossed. Every contingency is planned for. Every risk is mitigated. In Montgomery's mind, the victory is already won on paper. The fighting is merely an administrative formality. 200 miles to the south, the atmosphere in Lieutenant General George Patton's headquarters is electric, frantic, and profane. If Montgomery is the CEO of a massive corporation, Patton is a high-stakes commodities trader, screaming on the floor of the exchange. He paces his office, slapping his riding crop against his boot. His diary entries from this week reveal a man consumed not just by the enemy, but by professional jealousy. He writes that headquarters is giving the whole show to Monty. Patton operates on a doctrine of violent momentum. He believes that pausing to tidy up gives the enemy time to regroup, dig in, and kill more Americans. His Third Army has just completed a breathless campaign through the Saar-Palatinate, capturing 60,000 Germans in 10 days. He knows his men are tired, their uniforms caked in mud, their tanks running on captured fuel. But he also senses the enemy's pulse is failing. He tells his staff, "I don't want to get any messages saying holding position. We're not holding anything. Let the Hun do that." He drives his jeep to the river's edge near Oppenheim, ignoring the distant crack of sniper fire. He looks at the water. It is moving fast, but it is not the ocean. There are no tidal charts to consult, no naval bombardment required. He turns to his top Teen Corps commander, General Manton Eddy, and gives an order that defies the logic of strategic planning. Go. Just go. Don't tell anyone you're doing it. Just get on the other side and let them find out when we call from the East Bank. It is reckless, it is dangerous, and it is exactly the kind of war Patton was born to fight. On the Eastern Bank, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring studies a map that is becoming more fiction than fact. Having replaced the dismissed Gerd von Rundstedt as Commander-in-Chief West, Kesselring is tasked with holding the Rhine. But the tools at his disposal are pathetic remnants of a once-conquering force. The units reporting to him are under strength, fueled by charcoal and desperation. In the Oppenheim sector, the defense falls to a scattered collection of Volkssturm militia and training battalions. These are not the hardened veterans of the Eastern Front. They are 16-year-old boys with oversized helmets and grandfathers clutching bolt-action rifles from the previous war. German intelligence is suffering a total blackout. The Luftwaffe has been swept from the sky, leaving Kesselring blind to Allied movements. He can see the colossal smokescreen billowing in the north, Montgomery's 60-mile curtain of artificial fog, and naturally assumes the entire Allied weight is poised there. He shifts his meager reserves, the 11th Panzer Division, northward to meet the British threat. The quiet stretch of river near Oppenheim is left dangerously exposed, guarded only by the assumption that no army would dare cross without a massive artillery prelude. It is a fatal miscalculation born of traditional military logic. Hovering near the British headquarters is a figure who embodies the fading grandeur of an empire, Winston Churchill. The Prime Minister has travelled to the front, unable to sit in London while the final act of the European war plays out. He is dressed in his military uniform, chewing his cigar, eager to witness Montgomery's great crossing. For Churchill, Operation Plunder is not just a battle. It is a geopolitical necessity. He is acutely aware that the balance of power has shifted. The Americans now provide the bulk of the men and material. The Soviet Union is swallowing Eastern Europe. Churchill needs a distinctly British victory to ensure his nation's voice remains loud at the peace table. He has placed his faith in Montgomery's methodical genius to deliver a spectacle of British arms crossing the Rhine. He spends the days leading up to the attack touring the units, buoying the spirits of the Tommies, unaware that the strategic rug is about to be pulled out from under him. He believes the world is waiting for Montgomery's signal. He does not know that 200 miles south, a different signal is about to be given. Not with a roar, but with a whisper. As the sun sets on March 22nd, the distinct hum of cricket-like noises begins to rise from the American lines. Not insects, but the sound of unoiled wheels on assault boats being dragged through the mud. It is 22 Kossal hours. The banks of the Rhine near the small town of Nierstein are shrouded in a heavy, suffocating darkness. The river here is wide, the current swollen by spring thaw, moving with a deep, muscular power. For the men of the U.S. 5th Infantry Division, the Red Devils, this is the edge of the known world. Behind them lies the liberated territory of France and the Rhineland. In front of them lies the fortress of Germany. Usually, an operation of this magnitude is heralded by a symphony of destruction. The sky should be burning with tracer fire. The ground should be shaking from the impact of thousands of howitzer shells, pulverizing the landing zones. But tonight, there is only the sound of wind in the bare trees and the soft, rhythmic scuffing of boots in the mud. General Patton has ordered absolute radio silence. He has forbidden the artillery to fire a single registration shot. He is betting the lives of thousands of men on the element of surprise. Soldiers struggle under the weight of heavy assault boats, carrying them down the muddy embankments to the water's edge. These are not the massive landing craft of D-Day. They are fragile wooden and canvas skiffs, vulnerable to even small arms fire. The men whisper orders, their breath pluming in the cold air. They know that if they are spotted halfway across, they will be sitting ducks in a shooting gallery. The German searchlights on the far bank sweep the water intermittently, bright fingers of light searching for a target. Every time a beam swings near, the men freeze, hearts hammering against their ribs, praying to be mistaken for debris. It is now 22:30 hours. The first wave pushes off. The paddles dip silently into the black water. The current grabs the small boats immediately, threatening to spin them downstream, but the soldiers fight it, digging in hard, eyes fixed on the silhouette of the eastern bank. It is a terrifyingly long 800 feet. Every second stretches into an eternity. They wait for the flare, the scream of a machine gun, the inevitable alarm, but it does not come. The German sentries, lulled by the lack of artillery preparation, are not at their posts. They are huddled in bunkers, or perhaps watching the northern horizon where the British bombardment is expected. The American boats slide onto the gravel of the east bank with a soft crunch. Infantrymen leap out, wet to the waist, rifles raised, sprinting for the cover of the dikes. They find the German defences unmanned. A handful of sleepy Volkssturm guards are taken prisoner before they can even reach for their rifles. They stare in bewilderment at the wet, mud-caked Americans who have appeared like ghosts out of the river mist. The surprise is total. By midnight, the report flashes back to Patton's headquarters. The 5th Division is across. No bombardment, no casualties. The bridgehead is secured. Patton, upon hearing the news, does not celebrate. He immediately orders the engineers to begin constructing a pontoon bridge. He knows that getting the infantry across is only the first step. He must get his tanks across before the Germans wake up. The silence of the night is about to be replaced by the roar of diesel engines. But for now the Rhine has been breached, not by force, but by a masterful, high-stakes gamble. As the sun rises over the Nierstein bridgehead on March 23rd, the secret is out. The German reaction is frantic, but disorganized. Scattered artillery fire begins to fall on the American pontoon, bridges now spanning the river, sending geysers of water high into the air. But it is too late. The Sherman tanks of the 4th Armored Division are already rumbling across the swaying steel treads, their tracks clanking ominously as they reach the eastern bank. The stiletto has pierced the armor. Now Patton twists the blade. Meanwhile, in the north, the stage is set for the authorized invasion. Field Marshal Montgomery, unaware of the full scale of Patton's success, initiates Operation Plunder. It begins not with a whisper, but with an apocalypse. Over 3,500 artillery pieces open fire simultaneously. The sound is physically painful, a continuous rolling thunder that shakes the earth for miles. The sky turns black with bombers. The eastern bank of the Rhine in the British sector is churned into a wasteland of cratered mud and splintered trees. It is magnificent, terrifying, and methodical, a textbook example of overwhelming force. But as the British commandos and American paratroopers fight their way across the river under this curtain of steel, a message arrives at headquarters that changes the context of history. March 24th, 1945. General Patton picks up the field telephone to call General Omar Bradley. His voice is rasping with satisfaction. "Brad," he shouts over the static. "Don't tell anyone, but I'm across." He continues, savoring every word. "I sneaked a division over last night. There are so few Krauts around they don't know it yet, so don't make any announcement. We'll keep it a secret until we see how it goes." But Patton cannot help himself. He needs the world to know. He instructs his briefing officer to issue a press release that is deliberately provocative. It reads, "Without benefit of aerial bombing, ground smoke, artillery preparation, and airborne assistance, the Third Army commanded by General Patton crossed the Rhine River." Every word is a calculated jab at Montgomery's massive, resource-heavy operation in the north. Then comes the moment that cements the legend. On March 24th, Patton himself crosses the pontoon bridge. Halfway across, he orders his driver to stop the jeep. He steps out onto the swaying structure, amidst the roar of passing tanks and the distant thud of artillery. With the cameras of his signal corps rolling, he unbuttons his trousers and urinates directly into the Rhine. It is a crude, visceral gesture of dominance, a symbolic desecration of the German river of fate. As he buttons up, he looks at his staff and says, "I've been looking forward to this for a long time." He then bends down, scoops up a handful of dirt from the east bank, and lets it crumble through his fingers. "Germany," he says. The news hits the British headquarters like a shockwave. Winston Churchill, who is visiting Montgomery to witness the first crossing, is told that the Americans are already deep into the German interior. The thunder of Montgomery's guns suddenly sounds different, less like a breakthrough and more like a heavy, expensive door being battered down after someone else has already picked the lock. The race is over. The psychological balance of the Allied command has irrevocably tipped. The dust settles over the Rhine between March 25 and 28, revealing two very different battlefields. In the north, Operation Plunder is a success, but it is a victory bought with heavy coin. The British and American airborne forces dropped during Operation Varsity, the largest single-day airborne drop in history. suffer nearly 2,500 casualties in a matter of hours. The ground is littered with wrecked gliders and burning transport planes. They have secured the bridgehead, yes, but the advance is grinding and deliberate, hampered by the very rubble created by their own massive bombardment. In the south, the scene is radically different. Patton's Third Army is not grinding. It is galloping. The German defenses, having been bypassed rather than pulverized, are collapsing in a chaotic domino effect. The initial crossing at Nierstein cost the 5th Infantry Division fewer than 30 men killed in action, a statistical miracle in modern warfare. By the time the British engineers are still securing the heavy treadway bridges in the north, Patton has pushed 3 full corps across the river and is fanning out into the German interior like a spilled bottle of ink. The strategic map of Europe undergoes a violent transformation. The German Army Group B, commanded by Field Marshal Walter Model, finds itself in a lethal vice. Montgomery's 21st Army Group pushes down from the north, while elements of Bradley's 12th Army Group, led by the surging Third Army, swing up from the south. The Ruhr industrial heartland, the engine of the Nazi war machine, is being strangled. Over 300,000 German soldiers are trapped in what will become known as the Ruhr Pocket. It is amidst this collapsing front that the political reality crashes down on Winston Churchill. For months, the British Field Marshal had privately, and sometimes publicly, suggested that Patton was a liability, a loose cannon who endangered Allied cohesion. There had been moments during the Sicilian campaign and the crisis of the Bulge where the political pressure to relieve Patton had been immense. Montgomery had argued for a single commander of ground forces, himself, implying that the American method was too chaotic. But as the reports flood in from the Rhine, the Prime Minister stands on the banks of the river near Wesel. He looks at the carnage of the northern crossing and compares it to the lightning reports from the south. The old lion is forced to confront a hard truth. The American cowboy has not only outpaced the British Empire's finest tactician, but has done so with a fraction of the resources. General Eisenhower, the supreme commander, later recalls the shift in tone. When the success of Patton's silent crossing becomes undeniable, the narrative that Patton should be fired for insubordination or recklessness evaporates instantly. Churchill, ever the pragmatist, turns to his American allies. He does not demand Patton's removal. Instead, reviewing the map where Patton's spearheads are tearing through the heart of Germany, Churchill reportedly grumbles a concession that effectively ends the debate on command superiority. It is a remarkably swift advance. The sentiment is clear. The demand for control, the insistence on British strategic primacy, dies on the banks of the Rhine. The war is no longer a partnership of equals. It is an American-led rout. April 1945. The breach of the Rhine signals the death knell of the Third Reich, not just militarily, but psychologically. For 12 years, Nazi propaganda had promised that the fatherland was inviolable, a fortress protected by the mystical barrier of the Rhine. Now, American jeeps are driving through the manicured villages of Bavaria and the dark forests of Hesse. The Wehrmacht, once the master of the fighting retreat, simply dissolves. Units do not just retreat, they evaporate. Battalions surrender to single platoons. The rigid discipline of the Prussian officer corps cracks under the sheer velocity of the Allied advance. This victory validates a seismic shift in military doctrine that will define the remainder of the 20th century. Montgomery's style, The massive, centralized, artillery-heavy set-piece battle is revealed as a relic of a bygone era, effective but inefficient. Patton's style, decentralized command, rapid improvisation, and relentless speed becomes the blueprint for the future of warfare. The race to the Rhine proves that in the modern age, mobility is survival, and static fortification is suicide. The lesson is etched into the landscape. The Maginot Line failed, the Siegfried Line failed, and now the Rhine has failed. Diplomatically, the speed of the crossing alters the map of post-war Europe. Because the Americans breached the river so quickly and so far south, Eisenhower's armies fan out across central and southern Germany weeks ahead of schedule. This rapid envelopment encircles the Ruhr and renders the German industrial capacity to resist non-existent. It grants Eisenhower the strategic luxury and the controversial choice to halt his armies at the River Elbe, leaving the capture of Berlin to the Soviet Red Army. The swift collapse of the Rhine defense accelerates the end of the war in Europe, saving countless lives. But it also draws the line of the Iron Curtain, where the tanks finally run out of gas. As the smoke clears over the water, the Rhine flows on, indifferent to the empires that have crumbled on its banks. The pontoon bridges bob in the current, carrying the weight of a new superpower into the heart of the old world. The war is effectively over. The occupation has begun. War, in its final analysis, is rarely decided solely by the grandest plan on the largest map table. It is often decided by the individual who dares to move before the ink is dry on the orders. The crossing of the Rhine in March 1945 was more than a military maneuver. It was the final collision of two dying eras and the violent birth of a new one. Field Marshal Montgomery represented the apex of the old world. War as a science. A chess match played with caution, dignity, and overwhelming resources. He sought to dismantle the Third Reich brick by brick, but General George Patton represented the chaos of the modern age. War as a visceral test of will, where speed is the only armor that matters. His silent crossing at Nierstein did not just outflank the German army. It outflanked the very philosophy of static warfare. Winston Churchill, standing in the shadow of the Empire's twilight, recognized this shift. The demand to fire Patton, a sentiment born of earlier frustrations, vanished the moment the Third Army hit the eastern bank. There was no utility in silencing the man who was winning the war faster than the politicians could redraw the borders. The Prime Minister's acceptance of Patton's success was a quiet admission that the torch had passed. The British Empire had held the line when the world was dark, but it was the industrial fury and reckless speed of the American military that would finish the job. Today, the Rhine is once again a commercial artery, peaceful and grey under the German sky. The pontoon bridges are gone, replaced by steel and concrete spans that carry the traffic of a united Europe. But if you stand on the banks near Oppenheim, where the water moves fast and deep, you can almost hear the ghostly echo of that moonlit night. It is a reminder that history favors the bold, and that sometimes the most deafening statement in warfare is made not with a cannon but with a whisper in the dark.